And thank you everyone for joining us today. I know that you've often got better things to do, so it's a real pleasure to be here and share our thoughts with you. Look, I just want to talk about data tonight. I was the, as was alluded to, sorry, I'm just trying to work out, previously the Innovation and Technology Manager in Engineering at Vietstar Airways after a far too long career in aviation. And in that role as innovation, one of the things that really started to get my juices flowing was around the use of data. I had a saying, and you'll probably see this somewhere in the pitch, that a lot of companies, and Vietstar was one of those, were what I called data rich and information poor. And so I started to look at how that might look. Now, with COVID coming on, like a lot of airlines, there was no room for an innovation manager. And so I chose to move on. And I'm now with a company called LexX Technologies, which is very much working with the passion that I have. But I want to talk about the value of data that all companies have, and airlines, MROs, any of the aviation businesses are no different. They've got a lot of data. In fact, the word big data probably doesn't do it any justice. And when I talk to businesses, they'll often talk to me about the value of their data, how valuable their data is. But when we think about it and take a step back, I wonder if that's right. Is your data valuable? Because if I highlight to you that it costs you to collect data in any form, and it costs you to store that data, it costs you to back it up, it costs you to archive it, it costs you to keep it compliant. So far we've got an awful lot of cost, but really where's the value? And I know that I'm talking about ones and zeros on a hard drive somewhere, stored somewhere on the cloud or on your own premises. But if we talk about the value of data, then right now I would say it's actually a liability. It's sitting on the wrong side of your balance sheet. It's just a cost. And when people talk about the value of their data, I think they're perhaps talking about an unrealized value. It's a bit like saying, oh, my block of land is worth an awful lot of money. Well, yeah, if you can find someone to buy it. My share portfolio is great. Yeah, but if the stock market crashes, you won't realize that. It's only worth something when you do something with it. And I think data is exactly the same. And so if we look about what might be the value that's in your data, if we go back 40 years ago, when I was a young fellow starting out in aviation, we didn't even think about the value of data. I mean, most of our data was stored on cards. They were literally pieces of paper somewhere. So there was no value at all other than the fact that we had to have it to be compliant in some way. And 20 years ago even, we started to understand data, but we didn't really understand how we might use that data. So we were starting to collect data, but collecting data and storing data and using data are not the same thing. And again, I would say if you're just storing data, then it probably doesn't have much value to you. But now we have big data. And as I said a moment ago, I would surmise that in fact the term big data probably doesn't do it justice. There's an interesting statistic that I read not long ago that says the amount of technical data in the world doubles every 87 days. So it's now at the end of January. That would mean that by the end of April this year, the amount of technical data in the world will double. And then by the end of July, that will have doubled again. Now that's an awful lot of data in the world that people like you and I wish we could access. But the challenge is, how do I find the data that I actually need and filter out the enormous amount of data that's completely irrelevant and superfluous to what I want? How do I make use of that data? And so there's that statement I use. Many companies are data rich, drowning in data perhaps, but they're information poor. Having data is of no use to you. You need to convert that into something. And so I now have this philosophy that says you can turn data into information. And perhaps I could describe information as, for example, an Excel spreadsheet. So I've now got the data out of whatever storage system I've got and I've put it into Excel. So that's great, but really it's maybe not that useful unless you're an Excel guru. But if I'm clever, I can turn information into knowledge. And this is perhaps where the dashboards come into it. So I've now started to turn the data into dashboards. And without a lot of skills, I can start to interpret the data. The skill, though, is in knowing what to put in the dashboard. Because there's now so much data that how do I work out what's relevant and what's not? What's important, what's not? What's important to you may not be the same as what's important to me, even if we're in a similar role. We may not really think the same way. In fact, I hope we don't. Otherwise it'd be a boring world and you'd probably be a crazy person. But if we don't think the same way, then we don't interpret data the same way. So how do we get that information out? And this is where we come to the world that we're in now. And we're very lucky that we're in this third decade of the 21st century, because we're now getting to a world where the technology exists where we can actually turn that knowledge into wisdom. And by wisdom, I'm talking about that oracle that every business has. So when I was an apprentice, I very quickly learned who to go to. Who was the person I could go to because they knew it all? Who was the person that would guide me and teach me because they knew so much that there was no way I'd ever learn all of that? But as we get into this third decade of the 21st century, those types of people are less and less, because more and more people expect Google, Siri, something to give them the answers. But if you're the person that's really looking for that technical data, Google can't help you. Google can't query your data. So how do you find that oracle that's in amongst all the data that you've got? So I talk about this. With modern cutting edge technologies, we now have the ability to really, there will be stuff stored in your data. There will be information, knowledge, and wisdom in there that you haven't even thought to look for. There are patterns and trends in there that we never dreamt would exist. And the only way you're going to be able to find it is to use the technology that's now starting to exist. And these technologies have actually been designed for quite some time, but they're now relevant because of the computing power that's available to us in the cloud. 5 or 6 years ago, we knew about artificial intelligence. We understood artificial intelligence, but the reality was that the computing power just wasn't that could let us do it. But we're now at a stage where the systems not only read and interpret that data, they can literally comprehend it. An analogy I would give you is this. When my mum sends me an SMS, it's invariably filled with spelling mistakes, not because she can't spell, but because she can't type. But as a human being, I might laugh at her, but I can interpret what she was saying. It's very unusual for me to get a message from my mother that I don't actually know what she's trying to say. But of course, up until a few years ago, computers couldn't do that. And anyone who's tried to search a PDF and either had a spelling mistake in their search or there were spelling mistakes in the PDF and realized that they weren't finding what they looked for will understand exactly what I'm saying. But we've now got technologies available and the computing power available in the cloud that it doesn't care. It understands what's being said, spelling mistake or not, grammar or not. It literally gets what the context is and can interpret what's going on from there. And of course, what that means is we can then communicate with that system in a natural language as well. We're seeing systems now that can understand mixed dialects. For example, there's a dialect called Denglish, which is a mixture of German and English. But these systems can interpret that. And so what we're saying is, having systems like this that can work with your data, it's like having that all-knowing employee. It's like having that oracle, that senior person that's been with the company for 40 years. But that employee never gets sick, they never go on leave, They're always there. They never quit and go to someone else and take all of that with them. It's a genuinely wise employee, if you'll use the term, and all they want to do is help. And there's one last thing I'd probably like to say, and that is, if you feel that your data is valuable, then how do you invest it? If you've got a valuable portfolio, you would want to invest it. If you've got money in the bank, you would want to invest it. Well, why wouldn't you invest your data? Seems silly, really, not to. And I understand that what I'm about to say now can be considered controversial, but it's still worth talking about, and not for tonight. But I've got a whole series of conversations around how the sharing of data could have prevented certain disasters that happened within aviation in the last few years. So I say this, I say, if you find a way to sensibly share your data, and we can talk about that separately, but if you can sensibly share your data, then that just increases its value. If I was to say to you, what's your data worth? And you said to me, it's worth $1 million. I couldn't possibly share it, it's worth $1 million. But if I said to you, but hang on a minute, if you invest your $1 million and share it with 99 other companies who are willing to invest their data, have you shared $1 million or have you gained $99 million worth of data? And I think if you think about it, it makes sense. And if you think about this, if there are patterns, trends, learnings in your data that are valuable, then stands to reason you won't get 99 times the amount of trends, because many of them will be similar. But there will be trends in the data that you're given access to, that will equally return some value. And I would say this, the competitive advantage that people talk about in their data actually isn't the competitive advantage in the data. There's no advantage in your data. And I'm not talking about the clearly commercial stuff. I'm not talking about ticket sales or, that sort of stuff. I'm not talking about contracts with purchase prices. I'm just talking about the trends and patterns that are in your data. That's not where your commercial advantage is. Your commercial advantage is in your ability to extract the knowledge that's buried in that data. And even more to the point, it's the way you respond to the knowledge you gain from the data. If I was to present a dashboard to 3 different organizations, an identical dashboard to 3 different organizations, there's a very good chance that each of those would respond in a different way. That's the competitive advantage. It's your ability to take that knowledge and do something with it. So, in closing, because I hope that I'm leaving enough time for some questions, I'd love to hear questions and perhaps respond to comments. But I would say this, use the data you've got. Find a way to get that knowledge and wisdom out of your data. Because I promise you, there is stuff in there that, handled correctly, will tell you where you need a part, when you need a part, what part you need, who's going to need it, why you need a part. It's in there. Deep down, your business knows this. The same as if you've had a person in your stores for 40 years. I guarantee you they know so much you don't want them to go. It's in there. Find a way to extract that knowledge and wisdom. And find a way to invest your data. Invest your data the same as you would invest any other asset, and increase its value. Increase the return you get from the investment. And finally, stop worrying about your data quality. For 40, 30 years now, we've all been saying data quality, data quality, data quality. Well, the reality is, wherever humans involved, you're going to have less than prime data quality. It's a fact of life. So I say to you now, don't worry so much about your data quality. Worry about what's in there. Find ways that you can get into the data, share it with your teams, make it accessible, turn it into that employee that wants to come to work and wants to help everyone and wants to be the oracle and just wants to share some really important knowledge. And on that, I'll say thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I hope that that was informative. And over to you for some questions, perhaps.
Mike, thank you so much for that presentation. So let's get some questions. Are there any questions for Mike and his presentation on data? I don't see any questions here. I'm just gonna. Okay, so Mike, I've got some questions. I think first up, I think your presentation was brilliant in the sense that, you know, being an airline guy myself, I remember back in the day, you know, things like ATA, you know, your snag reports and your, you know, by ATA chapter. And I remember we had something called the buddy buddy system back in when I was vice president in SpiceJet. So what we would do is, you know, the 737-900 ER was a new version, a new variant we were flying in India. So the aircraft would obviously react differently. So we would share our information and share notes with, you know, with guys like Malaysian Airlines and, you know, Qantas and so on. And they would share, yeah, we had the same problem. You want to do this. And then we started sharing our reliability data. Then we started sharing our FDM data, you know, and, you know, we reached a point where it was so useful that, you know, we actually had a procedure which kind of came up and said, you know, this is not a Boeing approved procedure, but, you know, let's, you know, let the three of us go and ask Boeing to make it an approved procedure. And they did. So we saw a lot of changes. And so I think you got something, you know, pretty radical here. I mean, you know, so far it's been done informally and no one is really focused on, you know, actually, you know, using, you know, valuing your data, for God's sakes, man. I mean, you know, you got something, you've run an organization, you got so much of information lying in someone's laptop or Excel sheet or some darn database server or, you know, some old Lotus 123 files or whatever they are, you know, and then you start getting it together. You're like, oh, you know, good Lord. I mean, you know, this is telling us something, you know, and,
Right.
you know,
And if you think about it, Mark, I mean, one of the worries, and I didn't get into this, but I'm happy to mention it quickly. In aviation, like many industries, you think of the amount of information, knowledge, and wisdom that's hoping to retire very soon and go and sit in a rocking chair and smoke a pipe.
right.
And any business is going to be bereft without that knowledge. And yet the interesting thing about aviation, amongst other businesses, actually, nearly everything they've learnt, and people like you and I, we learnt from what's called the School of Hard Knocks.
Correct.
And those lessons, you don't really want someone to learn them the same way again. You want to share that lesson. And it's all there. Aviation, we wrote everything down. Everything is written down. So long as we ingest that and comprehend it, then they don't need to learn those lessons again. And one more thing quickly, I assume I've got just a minute or two. One more thing that's really interesting in this world is everyone, and you and I would be included in this, we're drowning in data. You know, I don't know about your brain, but my brain feels like mush sometimes. And, you know, just one more bit of information means I've got to squeeze something out that side. And yet we're sending these really important messages to our people. You think of the number of safety alerts that go out and bulletins and service bulletins. And, you know, I know where I was, there was a new safety alert went out about transporting tyres and they'll always to be deflated and things like that. But these guys, they just can't remember everything. It's not possible to remember everything we expect them to remember. And then when they make a mistake, we want to hang them out to dry and say, we sent you a bulletin and you signed to say that you'd read it and understood it. Well, yeah, that was 6 weeks ago and back then it wasn't relevant. I'm really sorry. I'm just human. Right?
Correct.
But if we can have systems, you know, imagine there's a little pretend person on my shoulder that says, hey, Mike, don't forget, when you ship a tyre, make sure it's deflated. Right? Because it knows what I'm doing. It knows the task I'm doing. It knows what's the safety that's relevant then or whatever else is relevant, and just remembers to say, don't forget. Now, these systems are ready to go. We've just got to get people to understand that the old days of a read and initial or whatever your business calls it, the old days of a PDF that you expect someone to read and magically remember, they're gone. People can't remember anymore. Hell, we're lucky to remember our password these days.
Oh, yeah, you know, seriously. No, but this is very, very interesting. Truly, this opens up a whole new perspective of how we've been doing things all along. And we've got a question for you, Mike. We've got Shannon Ellie who sends us a question. It reads, what companies are currently leading the change in finding value in data?
Well, the one that I know happens to be the one with the logo behind my head. Lex Technology is an Australian-based company that I was working with as a customer in my previous role. And I was so excited by what they've done that, you know, full disclosure, I'm now heading up the aviation and defence sector of that industry. Of that business. So these guys, in my opinion, I haven't been able to find a competitor to this business and what they're doing. This is a business that can ingest almost any kind of data, literally down to scans of handwritten documents. And they can ingest it, comprehend it, they get the context, and they can turn that into usable data using natural language. You ask it a question and it gives you a logical answer, not a search and replace type answer. It understands just the same as if I was to walk up to a human being and say, hey, what's the next bus to St. Leonard's? And you'd expect them to understand what I'm talking about. This is what the systems can do now. Doesn't worry about whether I spelt it correctly. It just knows what I'm asking and finds the answer. And I'll give you a really good example of that. It's outside aviation. But if you're working with electricity, you'll get what are called earth faults. But if you were to search for an earth fault in a PDF, it's going to tell you all about earthing stuff. It's not actually going to tell you that what you've got is a short somewhere in the system. But systems like this that understand the context, they'll take you straight to the sort of stuff that's there. And I'll tell you something else that's really starting to change is these systems don't learn at once. These systems learn every single day. So if there's a new lesson learned today, everyone knows that lesson tomorrow. This is a system where if I ask it a question today, I shouldn't be surprised if I get a slightly different answer tomorrow than I did today, because it might have learnt something in the preceding 24 hours. So, you know, as I say, at the risk of blowing my own trumpet, Lex Technologies is, in my opinion, without parallel at the moment. I'm sure they will be soon, but right now they're without parallel and they're leading the charge in this type of stuff.
Well, very, very informative. That's amazing. And folks who are joining in, we just heard Mike Harris shared a very interesting presentation on data. Mike, you know, stay connected, and wonderful having you with us today. And all those who want to know more about Lex Technologies and what Mike is up to and the kind of work he's done and how his company can support your organization, please drop an email with your contacts and information over to Simon Young. And Simon would be most happy to facilitate, connect directly with Mike. Mike, thank you so much, sir. Great to have you with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker today is Albert Koszarek. Albert, wonderful having you with us today. Albert is President and CEO of Aeroxchange, an aviation supply support company. You know, Albert comes from the Koszarek family. At least I know the Koszarek family, and I've known them for a while. They're industry icons. They come with a collective experience with managing and shaping aviation in the region for over at least 70, 80 odd years. And it's wonderful to have Albert with us today. Albert, over to you, sir. And so I'd like to ask you to share your screen so that we could all take a look at your presentation, and or I'm just going to pass it over to you. Over to you, Mike.
Mark, first, thank you for the kind introduction. It's certainly a pleasure to be here, and I wish everyone a good day. If we give me a moment, I will see if I can share my screen. And I would ask the question if you're all able to see my screen. Mark, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Very good. Okay. Mike, thank you for that nice presentation about data and thinking about data as an asset. I'm pretty excited to sort of complement what you were discussing surrounding how data flows around the industry and the ecosystem of aviation. And so we think about 20, 30, 40 years ago when Aeroxchange was in the minds of the airlines who had founded the company back in 2000. And I think the general feeling is there's a need for connective tissue in the industry that will allow data to flow between trading partners. And Mike, as you talked about, the data is there, and how we serve up the data is important so that we can extract the knowledge. And if you think about the aviation industry before the likes of Aeroxchange, supply chain transactions are being done through faxes and emails. You need somebody on the other side of the fax to read the fax, understand what it's saying, and then get on the keyboard to implement the fulfillment process inside the company to move the assets where they need to be. And so back in 1999, 2000, 13 global airlines got together, the Cathay, Singapore, JAL, ANA, Lufthansa, American, Delta, FedEx, SAS. They got together and said, you know, I think what the industry needs is connective tissue, that we can run a supply chain that could be competitive with some of the world leading industries like automotive, where there's no passing of emails and PDF files between trade partners. It's done electronically. As demand presents itself, that is electronically sent to the machines of the fulfillment suppliers. Those machines instantly ingest that information and are able to do fulfillment in a more effective way. But the key to this fulfillment is having connective tissue that allows that data and that information to flow between the trade partners. So back in 2000, these 13 airlines got together and started Aeroxchange. Aeroxchange is a global aviation marketplace that, in fact, last year, over 50% of all of the part component related supply chain transactions went through the Aeroxchange marketplace servers. This connected buyers and sellers so they could understand demand, send the signals to the appropriate supply partners, generate automatic fulfillment. And in this marketplace, our whole objective at Aeroxchange was to make the supply chain faster and more responsive, thereby improving financial performance, and to modernize that whole supply chain operation from forecasting through fulfillment, from tracking, from characterization on the performance of different operators and suppliers in terms of supply chain operation. Aeroxchange is over 20 years old, as Mark had said. We're a mature company, and we are in the business of connecting the operators to the OEMs, particularly the OEMs, and having a network that's connecting buyers and sellers that's highly trusted is critically important. And I think when you think about the data, recognizing that data is the trade partners' data and they have ownership for that is an important concept, particularly as you engage the big players in the industry so that your fulfillment processes can be automated with all of your vendors. In 2021, we are the industry's largest and most trusted e-commerce network. And hopefully, as I show you more of this presentation, you'll understand this isn't just about spare parts purchasing. It's about how you unload your balance sheet. It's about some of the things that Harmen is going to talk about and creative ways to have pooling arrangements and components, to activate your consignment programs in an effective way, to postpone the ownership and to allow partners to let you get more out of the assets that they're providing that are necessary to keep your aircraft in the air. So that's a little bit about Aeroxchange. And pre-COVID, I would have joyfully showed this slide sort of highlighting that airplanes are quite good at generating year-over-year growth. And we all know that in the last 12 months, that growth has been highly negative and very challenging for an industry that relies on travel. But we also know, even in positive environments, the industry's ability to generate return on invested capital has always been a challenge. The balance sheets are quite heavy. The asset turns are quite low. And so when we think about an airline, particularly today where cash is king, how do you help that airline become more efficient? How do you help that airline to get most out of its invested capital as we go forward? And that would bring me to simply thinking about what are the key elements of return on invested capital. I think one of the most important things is generate margin. And so as you think about your supply chain, and as Mark talked about, your data assets, generating revenue, we know now that the level of network operation in the commercial aircraft business is much lower. That's generating a lot of surplus material. There's a lot of legacy aircraft types that are being retired. There's a lot of surplus coming up. How do you get into a strong network that can get that surplus material in front of customers who can buy it? So think about how generating revenue and sweating those assets through better inventory turns, selling your surplus can happen. And so when the airline started Aeroxchange, they had a very keen eye on how can I sweat my assets and generate some revenue? And also, how can I reduce my costs? So when we think about cost reduction, we think about the quality of the components that I'm getting, the cost performance of the supplier, marking that to market, enabling advanced models for consignment to get some of those assets off your balance sheet, allowing you to generate effective and seamless pools so that your pools can place the components at the location they need to be at a minimum cost. And so we think about increasing the revenue while reducing your costs to get your margin up, and then keep your working capital down. So when you think about your working capital, you just need the supply chain to run faster. You need that accurate logistics tracking in real time so that you know where those assets are all of the time. And through speed, you're able to reduce the inventory that allows you to maintain an acceptable service level of parts and component availability. And so when we started Aeroxchange, we had a keen eye on trying to improve the operator's return on invested capital in a win-win environment that also enriches the supply base as well. So when we think about improving financial performance, better revenue, reduced inventory and labor costs, and reduced working capital. So when we think about the aviation ecosystem, we have the MROs on the left of this slide who were getting your components installed on your aircraft. They're doing the necessary base checks and keeping those aircraft earning revenue for the operator. In the maintenance cycle, you've got the maintenance planning, the flight operations, the tech records, and what we're going to focus on is materials management. And materials management, if it's an AOG situation and you need to find assets fast, you'll generate a loan and a borrow. If you're fulfilling spare parts because you're looking at your forward demand and you realize that you need part flow either through consignment type orders or purchase orders, and then for those components, those serviceable assets that are coming off wing, how you put those into your repair loop and put them in the loop in a way that you have high visibility and drive turnaround times that are world-class. And so you're repairing parts to support your material needs. And then you've got the pool providers who are coming forward with nice services around exchange orders that allow you to get access to assets and pay on a power by the hour scheme so that as your operation goes down, you've got a good predictor of what your costs will be. and not buying parts or repairing parts as they're coming off wing without a very good vision of what's going to happen in the next months or years. And so you got these legacy processes that knit together the MRO supply chain. And when we think about Aeroxchange, you're starting to feel like Kermit from Sesame Street, where the way the airlines and materials management operations are going is through rekeying information through emails, sending faxes to your trade partners, and you're keying it into the email. Now your trade partner's having to read that email, as Mark talked about, understand what it means, and then implement that information in their fulfillment system so that parts can flow to keep the aircraft flying. So at Aeroxchange, our objective is to be the connective tissue that allows the airline's M&E system to talk directly to the computers and the machines that are used by the spare parts providers to process purchase orders, the repair shops that are repairing those components, and those service providers who are running the pools. And so we created a set of electronic messages that are captured in the major M&E systems today that have these out-of-the-box interfaces into the Aeroxchange network. Those systems like the Trax and the Amos and the SAP and the Oracle and the Pentagons and the Ramcos. All of those now have interfaces where their machines talk directly to the Aeroxchange network, and the Aeroxchange network now talks directly to the system that the supply chain is running, so you get that seamless data transfer. In loans and borrows, we have a platform, a connective tissue we call Aero AOG that allows you to see service-ready inventory that your fellow operators are running and be able to generate a borrow that allows you to get fulfillment within hours to solve those nasty AOG challenges. Then in the purchase order area, we have a product called the Aero Buy, which allows you to electronically create the purchase order, send the purchase order to the spare parts seller. That purchase order is automatically loaded in their machine in real time. When it hits their machine, it's printing the pick slip so that you get fulfillment from that pick slip that's on the order of 20 or 30% faster than it is by having to rekey. And speed is life in this business, as we all understand. And as you can get that speed up, you don't need as much inventory to maintain the service level that the MRO demands. In the repair space, we have an electronic choreography where the repair orders coming out of the airline M&E system advising that we have a unit off wing, we have a repair order with time and cycle information, and it sends the order and the work scope electronically to the repair shop. The repair shop knows that unserviceable component is coming inbound. Is that component's coming inbound, the repair shop is getting tracking on its anticipated arrival. They kit for it. The unit shows on dock. They inspect it, induct it into the repair center, provide repair status, do an electronic teardown to electronically send the teardown information back to the airline so they can store that and build those wonderful dashboards that Mark talked about, and allow electronic quotation so that the work scope and work orders can be updated, and then the return shipment, the receipt, and very accurate understanding of what the real turnaround time is for the order stream between airline and its repair vendors, making it easy to understand where their improvement opportunities lay. And then in the pool business, Aeroxchange has a platform, a connective tissue we call Aero Component. Aero Component nests into Boeing CSP, it nests into KLM, it nests into Lufthansa, Air France, SRT, and it is the transaction fabric that is used most commonly in this industry, allowing the M&E system of the airline recognize I have a pool part coming off wing and very easily send that exchange request to the provider of the pool so they can choreograph the fulfillment. And so what Aeroxchange is trying to do is move us from a world of Kermit where we're rekeying information and looking at PDFs, to a world of data, where the information in the M&E system of the airline is being sent electronically to the supply chain partners so they can be more efficient and more accurate as they support the fulfillment needs of the airline. So as I talked about, the Aeroxchange connective tissue supports all of your MRO processes, whether it be C&E purchasing, rotable component purchasing, that's done in the product we call Aero Buy. The component repair management is done in a connective tissue we call Aero Repair. The AOG data inventory sharing and electronic loans and borrows is provided in a connective tissue we call Aero AOG. And our pooling programs is supported electronically in Aero Component. The whole process of material sourcing, listing that serviceable material now is an electronic process. You provide data feeds to the Aeroxchange marketplace. We, in an Amazon-like way, socialize those opportunities with potential clients so you can get the most out of your surplus material, getting it to those people in need who are willing to pay what is a fair price. And most importantly, there's not a need to use a web browser as you have your logins to the hundreds of web browsers that we all use today. This communication of fulfillment, demand, orders, repairs, those are directly communicated from the M&E system of the operator to the fulfillment system of the supplier. And so having that direct linkage means that your users don't have to rekey data and the information flows more accurately. The Aeroxchange network, we've been busy for 20 years building this network. We have 60 major airline customers. And as I said last year, our customer set today transacted north of 57% of the industry volume last year. We are the most sophisticated and the most secure network in the aviation MRO vertical market. We have thousands of international suppliers who participate in the network. And the trust that we build with our buyers and sellers makes this a place where the OEMs are comfortable doing business, knowing that their data is protected, their IP is protected, and we provide that high level of service supporting the OEMs so they can provide world-class service to the airlines, many of which you see on this slide. So we have a vibrant network of buyers and sellers, and when we think about the value of this global network, it's the visibility around the components and the repair services that you can see quickly from a large population of airlines selling surplus, vendors who are trying or making their components and their repair services easily visible to you, the buyer. The capability around having 100% of your transactions done electronically in a secure, standardized platform. And from that speed and the visibility, that's where you get your lead time savings and your cost reductions. And the efficiency then drives out inventory out of the ecosystem, which allows airlines to lighten up a bit of their balance sheet and allow the airlines to have improved return on invested capital. When we talk about the Aeroxchange brand, we think about noting that it's an airline-owned entity with a neutral view of all suppliers in the network. We provide tailored e-commerce workflows that have deep airline understanding on how serviceable and unserviceable assets are managed and what certifications are required. And gone are the days where you're sending somebody a PDF of an 8130 or Form 1. But here are the days where the legal document is coming to your system in XML, so you know exactly what is in that 8130 or Form 1. You can ingest that information, you can receive against it, and you can act on it. Our goal at Aeroxchange is to drive asset optimization through speed and having a fast-running network to get the information across the trade partner ecosystem. in an infrastructure that is unassailable. We spend a lot of energy at Aeroxchange protecting with firewalls and encryption so that the system is safe and is safe from hackers and from evildoers in the network. And through this structure, we provide innovation in the M&E supply chain by creating electronic workflows that are most necessary for keeping the roadable assets in play. And most importantly, we do not sell your data. When you trade in the Aeroxchange connective tissue, we know that the data that you are trading with is your data and shared only with your trade partner who's directly involved in the transaction. We do not sell your data. And so it's really important when we think about this big ecosystem that we've built and the amount of data flowing through. Your data is safe at Aeroxchange. We do not aggregate it. We do not sell it. And that's how we create that trust environment, not only with the operators, the airlines, but equally as important with the OEMs who participate in the Aeroxchange network. And so I've shared with you a bit about the connective tissue and the platform that we've built. And we'd certainly like to offer anybody interested in a no-charge ROI study to show you how the Aeroxchange platform and connective tissue can help improve your operation and provide financial gains. We work to understand your operation and the nuances in your operation, show you the software connective tissue that best suits your business. We'll show you how our pricing provides strong ROI for you, implementing and stepping up to a purely digital supply chain. And we'll provide you the documentation so you have a nice deck of facts to take up for executive review to make an informed decision, particularly now as cash is tight. And with that, I'm quite grateful to have taken the last 20-25 minutes and shared with you a little bit about Aeroxchange, what we do, how we create speed, and would be excited to take any questions that anybody might have. And if there are any questions, or if you'd like more information, please contact Mark Atkinson at aeroxchange.com. Mark would be more than happy to reach back to you. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Thank you so much, Albert. Very informative, and thanks for giving us a quick overview on Aeroxchange. I had no idea you were so focused in the APAC region, especially in China, Asia, and Southeast Asia. So it's great to great to have your perspective. And so just want to quickly follow on. Do we have any questions for Albert? Okay, so there don't seem to be any questions.
Hello, Tony.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, how are you? So
Good.
thank you for your good presentation about Aeroxchange. I see your platform is very interesting. So, but I want to know more about the pooling and the fly hour agreement, especially for your platform. How you can deal with this one, because most of the pooling and fly hour we have about tendering, bidding, very complicated with so many of the OEM and also big MRO. So how your platform can solve this issue? For buying spare, your platform is good because you can see the ride, the code, and other feedback. But for the pooling and especially for the fly hour agreement, it's very important. This is how to help the airline to see which is the good ones, because the bidding and tendering is quite complicated.
Yeah, and so when we think about the pooling problem, we think the importance of seamlessness across all of the providers who offer services for different part number families, different ATA chapters. And so when we at Aeroxchange come and think about pooling, we recognize that you may have 3-4 providers of pools that are focused on different fleet types, different part number families, and you negotiate your power by the hour agreements. accordingly. Now, when units come off wing, you want a standard way to communicate that I have an off-wing unit, I have demand for an exchange unit, I want to track the fulfillment of that exchange unit, and most importantly, the return of the core. The service provider needs that core so he can maintain his asset base to give you the kind of service level you need. So by normalizing that data exchange, we allow you to communicate with the big pool providers all in the same way, so that your internal operation is not impacted by who is providing the pool and what are the nuances in the agreement, but gives you a more standard way to communicate with multiple pool providers, so that you can expand the part number content and do that in a more seamless way. So you're not having to rekey information in and out of the pooling provider's website and keying it back into your ME system, that it's coming off wing, electronic messages sent to the pool provider, they get it accurately in real time, they do fulfillment, you get an alert that advises you to return the core, you know exactly when all those transactions happen, and you get very accurate assessment of what the performance of what the service level is for each of the pool vendors in a very undisputed way. And so it's the standardization of the choreography that I think makes the pooling situation a bit more attractive as we go forward, as well as provide you the opportunity to unload your balance sheet.
So yeah, thank you. And another question about the platform, whether is there any mechanism like IA integrated in your system to help the airline, also the supplier and vendor can exchange, especially for the used service material, because airline also have the demand, like Alibaba. I talked about the Alibaba platform. They have seller, buyer, sometimes buyer also the seller. So
yes,
we have the demand, so we can upgrade to your system, and you are automatically matching the order, and you can
that's
get
right.
it free. Yeah, that is the way. But whether your
That's right.
how your platform can solve this one?
Yeah,
You
and so yeah, like in the Alibaba model, you're lifting your surplus material into the network. When you lift it into the network, now that becomes visible to the trade partners who have demand. And so now you're matching buyer and seller and opening up an electronic communication. So where you have been a buyer, but now in the surplus market, you're a seller, you know who has demand. They're requesting electronically availability, pedigree of the unit, pricing, and you're able to respond and then choreograph the fulfillment as they send you a purchase order, so you then can unload the surplus material to those people that need it and are willing to pay for it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think your
You're
platform is
welcome.
very interesting. I think for my suggestion, because for actually for the MROs and also airlines, the data for is very wide, and a lot of country involved, a lot of OEM in US and also Europe demand for this one matching is very difficult. And another issue, if you can integrate another modem for like financial advice, you say financial advice, whether you can integrate it for financial advice, like for M&A's opportunity or investment, like this, some kind is also more interesting for your platform, because you have enough data for buyer and seller for the world. Is there any country, is there any region they need for investment or any opportunity for like joint venture or cooperation between the other country, or some like US company want to explore another opportunity market in the Asia or others, other area regions? So whether your platform in the future will be include, this would be the best, and your platform will be very popular like Alibaba in the future.
Yeah. And if you think about with our airline owners, our mission every day is to make the MRO supply chain more efficient and more effective. And so we're automating the supply chain streams so that they can be faster, more accurate, and give those players in the industry a chance to see the market, be able to react more in real time with the market, and just drive value into the industry.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the questions.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much, Albert. Thanks for your presentation and a detailed overview. And Mr. Chong, thank you so much for stepping in, and very interesting perspective that comes out. I think the whole idea of sometimes the seller is the buyer and the buyer is the seller, and
Yes.
in many times I've seen it with when you need a part. I remember with one of the most common bits that I've faced in my career is windshield crack and your windshield getting blown up in a remote station, and you got to ship not just a windshield, you got to ship tooling, resources, and getting a windshield out of nowhere is insane. I mean, you've got a guy who's got a windshield who wants to sell it, but actually he wants to buy one. So it's.
I can help you with that problem, Mark.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, and it's insane because I remember in 2010 I used to work for an airline in the Middle East, and we were flying for the US DoD. We were flying over to the military bases in Afghanistan, and we had a 737-400 with a windshield crack. All the panes were busted, and to get something because you're over in Bagram, you're gonna get the aircraft out of there because it's a military airfield. So it's insane. But Albert, thanks for your perspective, and I think you should write a start a blog or something where you could share more perspectives. It would be nice to get the word out, man. I mean, we need. This is the best time to do it post-COVID. And if you're joining us in the webinar on post-COVID-19 aviation path flight in management, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. My name is Mark Martin, and I'm the CEO of Martin Consulting. You just heard Albert Koszarek, President and CEO of Aeroxchange. If to get Albert's presentation, please send us an email. Kindly contact Simon Young, and he'll have the presentation and further information about Albert sent over to you in your email. Our next speaker is Mr. Trinh Cuong. Mr. Cuong has been a very active participant of CASIA, as well as with InnoWin. He's been part of several of our webinars during the last couple of months, and continues to share valuable contribution to raising awareness in the region. Vietstar Aero Engineering is an MRO based out of Vietnam. The company has evolved and shaped its business to be more commercially aggressive, to be more agile, and taking advantage of best practices worldwide. Vietstar Aero Engineering today is emerging and is on the path of reinforcing its local as well as regional position. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Trinh Cuong with us. Mr. Cuong, over to you, sir.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for your presentation. I'm very happy. It's a pleasure for me to have presentation about Aero part and Vietstar and Aero. And thank you for Simon to have given me the chance to talk about this topic. It's very interesting topic. And also most of the airline OEM they are concerned at the moment due to the severe situation in COVID. Before I start the session, we have looked for my company, Vietstar Airlines Corporations. So we have three major in aviation. Vietstar Airlines for commercial aviation and private aircraft operating and just fly, ground handling. And we are the #1 company in Vietnam for fly VIP. And this year we will have a plan to launch the low-cost carriers, and also have a flight training center in Ho Chi Minh City. We also have another company, Vietstar, belong to the group. We also one of the big logistic company in Vietnam. And the last one is the MRO side, is the integrated MRO with Vietstar Aero Engineering companies. We have the capability up to C3 check for A310, A321, line maintenance, house support, space maintenance, structure repairs, camo service and maintenance service for private jet. And we are the only one, the MRO Vietnam, to have the capability to repair on the business jet to King Air, Legacy. So to talk about the topic, we will see about we have a look for aviation market in the world, in Vietnam, and also we have overview for aircraft spare part, and we come to the aviation part planning and procurement management optimization and controlling maintenance cost by optimize part and supply chain management. So for aviation market in the world, we see the air volume is still very low in terms of just a pick up slowly, but again we already have resurgence of new kind of COVID, and also everything retarded the role, especially for international market, and currently only around 200 billion RPKs, down nearly 60% compared to last year, and the loss for airline is standing, and big loss in the history of the aviation market, nearly 130 billion. It's mostly in China, Asia Pacific region, about 57 billion lost, and next is Europe and the US and Middle East. For the aircraft deliveries this year also very low. 800 aircraft, we expect for 800 aircraft for deliveries, compared to last year about 1,300 aircraft for delivery. So we hope this year, 2021, we shall have the same delivery like 1,300 aircraft, but we didn't know whether the airline will still cancel or not. We just wait for the market outlook, especially for the vaccine of the COVID, and how the government of other country can cope with. Especially we can see some good sign, like some country like China control very good. Vietnam also one of the country control very good COVID, and the domestic market is recover very strong. At the moment, Vietnam market will be recover fully by this year, the same as volume as last year. So that's very positive signal for the aviation market. But at the moment, if we see about the storage aircraft, it's still very high. So nearly about 9,800 aircraft is still stored, twice more than last year, and currently we have about 22,500 aircraft is used up to now. So airline service is aircraft and service contract about nearly more than 21%. It's still farther than the rough of the RMK, because the airline they use aircraft for domestic and short-haul route, and also high demand for the rate. If we look for the operating cost, and we see the decline of operating cost about 47% is much lower than the loss of revenue side, and cost for the employment cost we cannot reduce much, only the minimum, and due to some circumstance, so the employee cost only reduce about 29%, and this one can be cannot reduce more, and then slowly the cost of employment is increased by the time when the market recover. This one, we look for the cash flows, airline cash flows. This is very important. We pack most of the decision for the spare part. Now the next cash flow for the Q3, you see drop of 53%, especially during the time the oil rise so slowly is increased. Now nearly about 60 US per barrel. So it also make the recovery for the aviation market difficult. If you have look for Vietnam markets, we have this year the fly rub, the number of fly rub around about 33%, and we have total about 2016 fly. Last year compared to last year, up 33%. So in line, this is so this year the whole country carry about 43.7 million passenger, and we lost about 4 billion of US. So in revenue loss for all the airlines in Vietnam, and for the international passenger, we see this a big impact with more than 52% drop for the volume. So if we see the aircraft spare part for overall aftermarket spare part this year, we expect around 26 billion, and less than 60 billion pre-COVID estimates for 2020 versus 52 billion in 2019, so roughly 50%. For a used serviceable material market, we have around 2.8 billion, occupy about 11% of the overall aftermarket material, compared to 4.7 billion in last year. So last year about 9%, roughly 40%. But actually we see the percentage of the used service material increase in the overall aftermarket material due to a lot of aircraft retirement. This year, around 2,500 aircraft will be retired, compared to usually about 1,100 aircraft per year. So now a lot of aircraft retirement that so the market for use of service material is quite very potential. I say a lot of spare in the market, so the rise up very strongly. That reason why this is a good choice also for airline to look for this. So you see the percentage for the use of service material also increase in the overall aftermarket material. And if everything continue back to normal, we see the role for the used serviceable material will grow 68% and resource 7.9 billion. So this is also one of the interesting parts. We see the role in the used serviceable material. If we look for the planning of aviation part, we talk about the general, because I also involved for planning of for supply chain in more than 10 years in my company. So if most of the we have to look for two kinds of one is full outsourcing for airlines. That means some staff airline they are full outsourced. Like in my country, we have Viettar airline just launched. They are really nearly fully outsourcing. So maintenance service, including line maintenance, base maintenance, component maintenance, spare part support, and pooling for sure. The airline must to be signed with one or OEM or any big MRO. And mainly the pooling and fly agreement for spare part is in profitable part. For buying and stock, this one is I see not a popular choice at the moment. Mostly a pooling and fly hour agreement, because they want to save the cost now. Especially they want to have intensive investment for spare part at this time due to cash flow constraints. If you are only partial outsourcing, like some airline in Vietnam, if they don't have MO or only partial, they only part M, but they only have limited capability for maintenance, they can outsource for heavy aircraft maintenance like C-check, OP, and component maintenance and spare part support for sure. Mostly the component, not much airline will be handle this one. And again, we will see the pooling and fly out agreement for spare part is still very popular compared to buying. But this time we have to expand more pooling for tool and equipment also, because for investment, tool and equipment also heavy. But we need to buy in some, this one like a mixer, because if you have capability for line maintenance and some phase check or A check, you need to buy a few to adapt and you to get your capability to serve your demand. If not, it's difficult to do the work. For purchase, consumable, expandable for stock, or we have an option to consignment stock. But this one, again, if you have high volume, we can look for consignment stock. But if low volume, we can buy and stock, especially for line maintenance. We will come back later for this point. This one for forecasting. I think we mostly consumption-based forecasting. We will expandable, consumable. We have can be looking for some method like reordering bond, so certificate. And for demanding, especially forecasting for rotatable, we need to have see a lot of factor like lease time, quality by aircraft, flight hours, and the other. This one is mostly for unscheduled maintenance, because scheduled maintenance is much more easy because we already have in the MED. We can define this one, but based on my advice during this time, because this one we can read it, and I think we better combine into about per quarter or per shipment. But due to this time, due to the cash flow issue, so maybe per quarter should be the right time. Because now the shipment cost is very high. So if we only read it for 1 month and the shipment cost and also the lead time, now this time TT also very long. So it's not enough time for you to buy the spare. So it's better buy per quarter. It will be fair and reasonable at this time due to cash flow and also the reasonable budget. If we look for the part planning, we also have to see about clustering part. We can follow the process. Clustering back, forecasting method and planning parameter. For clustering back, we can do by separate the item by usage value or by usage variability. So usage value, we have high value and low value. And we see high value will be how might have a much higher percentage than a low value. And for the usage variability, we can see about the back with the constant use or irregular use, and we can see decide how many percent, and we see the figure. Forecasting method, we move to custom method. We have simple linear regression, simple moving average, or weighting moving average. For the last one, length parameter, we can look for some factor like lead time, reorder bond, loss size, economic order quantity, and safety stock. For optimize the requirement for airline during this time is cash flow shortage, under pressure cash flow shortage, and debt burden from a lot of vendor, including lessor. So now, because a lot of most of the airline they have redundant aircraft, a lot of aircraft will still parking. So I think the first solution for protocol, especially for high value item, we will look for ropes or spare from the aircraft parking first before we move for buying. And we have another option to this one, we control and minimize the inventory level. And currently in Vietnam, I believe also in the other country the same. Now the turnaround time TT for the C-check extend delay about maybe 10 to 20%, sometimes 100%, because no material due to the inventory level up on the airline Vietnam also very low. And to top up like usual, as usual, is difficult because due to the cash flow issue and so the debt from the vendor. In case you want to buy, you need to pay the own debt. Also, you buy, you have to pay for the new item. You need to pay. You need to buy. So that reason why to minimize this one also the also very important for all of the airline now to reduce the cost and reduce the cash. The budget, the cash outflow, and we can look for another option like budget use service material to reduce the cost. But I believe this one only applicable for some component, not engine, because engine is the most I see they rely on the line limited part for engine. Line limited part, if you buy used material, also no use because you buy, and also we have to we have very little choice, and after that we have to go for repair. So we have to think carefully about this one. But for other components like wheel, brake, landing gear, other components should be, every component also is acceptable during this time. And this is also a way to optimize your equipment. For the controlling of maintenance costs, for the supply chain management. So we will see about the inventory. Now the inventory, the need must be reliable and expensive equipment. And we need the very complicated, sophisticated system to maintain. So that's the reason why the trend pooling concept, pooling will be very popular at the moment to optimize the inventory. For repair, due to the launch of the new aircraft, so a lot of new repair capability, and cannot be in local, because local cannot keep, which that means in your country cannot keep up unless like some modern or some country like US or Europe, or some like the normal country like other third country like Vietnam or the other, the role of the new catalyst is very slow. So that's the reason why we need to have the look for outside outsourcing, and then with the partnership customer networks for the repair and for the shipment, logistics, and the supply chain. Now the trend is the shipment cost very high, and also the lead time is very long due to the COVID, and also the traveling difficulties. So that's the reason why most of the airline they want to combine a lot of order in one ship to reduce the shipment cost, and especially for some small items. This one also make the delay, but now they will think because the delay of the back and also the operation of the aircraft, because now redundant of the aircraft, so we have to see which way is the this is the reasonable way or the best way for the airline, because the aircraft have redundant aircraft, so we can use the other aircraft to fly rather than the aircraft we are doing C check or do phase check or do other ad hoc work. So consider this one is a choice of the commercial side, and we think that. But this one we can solve by tracking localization, to track your shipment, also to maintain your lead time and optimize the cost for the shipment. And the last one is for predictive maintenance is still very popular at the moment, especially for engine, because engine is very high cost. So we need to monitor this one. So we see, and we will look for the MOs when we need the time for repair. If we see the cost for material from engine overhaul, heavy airframe overhaul, component overhaul, line maintenance, we see most of line maintenance materials occupy very little cost, and most of the line they do the line maintenance work. So I think for the consumable and also for expendable for line maintenance, airline must buy, because also not a high value item, and this one you must buy to fit your operation. And for the airframe maintenance, I think for airline at the moment we can combine. We buy in ahead for 3 months or 4 months, depend on your cash budget, depend on your fund. So it's would be right time, because if you buy because you don't have money, if you buy so short, not enough time for the turnaround time. If you find a defect for the aircraft but you don't have the stock, you have to look for to buy. It's not even though now buy AG so well, take longer than normal. So we do a lot of C-check for customer, and now a lot of C-check will be delayed due to new spare, and we already recommend them to buy the stock longer a little bit, mean how the term, so that we can avoid the TT will be delayed, will make more cost for the airline. For engine overhaul and component overhaul, especially you see the cost, the percentage of the material is very high, but most airline cannot do much. Only some airline they have MRO, like Singapore Airlines or Thai Airways, they have engine shop, Lufthansa, or some airline they have MRO, they have engine shop or component shop, they can monitor for this one. Most of the airline they have this capability, so I think this one will be only for the big airline have the MRO, so they will may monitor the cost of this one. can be used. Component side, we can look for the used service material to save the cost for repair component. For engine, we have to look for PMA or EBA at the moment rather than used material. It depends. We will see the situation and we decide. And the last thing I want to know about the optimize supply chain management and the warehouse. Yeah, warehouse we need to see put the right location, especially now the shipment cost is very high, and also the turnaround time also very critical. So the warehouse must put in the hub of the logistic center. It's not supposed anywhere. And also this one I want to mention the bonded warehouse. So if in any country can grow or can set up the bonded warehouse, especially in Vietnam now, we have the issue now. The cost for spare part is very high because most of the line they buy by themselves. They don't have the hub like Singapore, Malaysia, or Thailand. We have the hub of logistics and we don't have the hub for the spare part. And my company also have the project to set up the hub, but we're still struggling with the law for the tax issue and import tax, how to move the part outside if they put the bonded store in Vietnam. But if we can set up this one, we save a lot of cost for the airline. Now the issue for bonded warehouse is still a big issue in Vietnam at the moment. We have a lot of airlines now, and the road market is still very good. Even though this year we'll still have a lot of aircraft receiving, but the bonded warehouse is a big headache at the moment for all of the airlines because we don't have a hub now. So the cost for the shipment of spare is quite a lot, and also because we don't have a hub, so every time we need to buy is take very long time, turnaround time. The cost for airline will be increased compared to Singapore and Malaysia. For jet inside the delivery, we still keep, especially for this time, because most of the airline now they don't want to keep stock and they want to have low stock. And even though they have inventory alarm, but they don't want to top. They only say until the AOG they need. Because now because cash flow issue, so most airlines don't want to stop, and also the big MO Vietnam they don't want to sell the material to the customer. Like our vehicle is a big MO Vietnam of Vietnam Airlines. They also don't want to sell support the spare part for other airlines, even though their customer, because no stock. They only reserve the material now for Vietnam Airlines. So we see the issue now due to the cash flow issue. That's also the big challenge for the airline in operation, especially for Lunar New Year. We have a lot of operation, and we need to think about this. So just-in-time delivery is to have the supply to monitor the spare part in time to save the cost. And another thing we say with kitting. Kitting is very popular. I think will be popular in the future. So kitting will be sell a lot of cost for the airline and the MO because we can buy the spare, combine one bucket, and we avoid the minimum order quantity. So this is also good from the vendor. The kitting will be popular because this one will avoid redundancy cost. We need to buy about sealant and also some small chemical and other. We need everything, ball and nut. We need to have the minimum quantity, and this one quite a lot. Sometimes we didn't use, or we use it 1-2 times, so we have redundant of the inventory, and that's the reason why kitting is very popular now. And we can consider airline will be consider this to save the cost. And for program management, every airline they have the software put into this to monitor this minimize inventory. And also we can think about if you have big airline, but if you're not good in optimize the cost for this one, we can think about like Aero Exchange platform. I think also one of the good option. I see this one very interesting. It can save a lot of cost at the moment, especially for material, because material occupy a lot of cost. And lastly, I want to talk about the fastener management, because this one we do a lot of check and we monitor more and not actually not important, but sometimes we don't have. We have AOG, especially for engine. So and some critical component and critical like flap repair, rudder repair. So this one we need to have this one we need to monitor and put in the program and to see which one we need to buy, and we buy stock first this one not about link with about the cost budget. You have to think can persuade the CEO or the management. This one is a must because only one bond or one nut can be make the aircraft delay for turnaround time, AOG for a few days. So, but the value of this one very small. So that's the reason why we need to hasten alert about this one and make the program for this. So this is my presentation. Thank you for listening. I will look forward for your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chong. And we'll just, do we have any, so I'm just going to check if there are any questions for, no, we don't have any questions at the moment, but I think given the paucity of time and where we are now, we'll let's just take our questions towards the latter half and post the panel discussion and come back to Mr. Chong if there's anything that, if there's anybody who has any questions, please put it up on the little Q&A icon that you see there at the bottom. Click on that button and pop your questions there, and we're happy to have them respond as soon as possible. Just about coming up over 4:30 Hong Kong time, 2:05 India time. Welcome to the webinar on post-COVID aviation part supply chain management. You just heard Mr. Trinh Chong of Vietstar Engineering. Thank you, sir. Wonderful to have you with us today. And we're moving on to our next speaker, Mr. Harmen Lanser. He's Component Product Development and Logistics Head at Air France KLM. Very happy to have Harmen with us today. So initially, I think as part of the previous communication that you may have received, we were trying to structure this as a Q&A, but what we do now is we push the Q&A for the latter half of the webinar, and we'll have a presentation by Harmen, and then move over to Luke Morvan. Harmen, over to you, sir.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. For me, it's good morning. I had to get up quite early for this conference. Can you hear me well, Mark?
Yes, sir, I certainly can. I think Albert, Luke, Trinh, and Mike, how do you read Harmen?
Yeah, terrific.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm working with two devices because my laptop is not accepting Zoom video and my tablet is, but my tablet is not accepting my presentation. So I'm working on two devices. You should see my screen now. And so let's see. Do you see my screen now or not?
Yeah, we see.
Okay, good. I thank you, by the way, Trinh, for your very good presentation. I think it's very connective to the one that I will do. And Al, please don't change Aeroxchange into AliExchange, please. Okay, so
Will do, Harmen. Will do.
So first of all, a short introduction to our company, Air France KLM Engineering and Maintenance. We are a nose-to-tail airline MRO, providing maintenance for engines, components, aircraft, engineering support, logistics support. My role, as indicated by Mark, is I'm product development, component availability. So I'm specialized in components. I'm working in that area for about 20 years now, working with Aeroxchange for 20 years now, I think, Al. So
yes, a joyful 20 years.
So I hope that I can add something, although I must say that the previous presentation is also very much interesting. I do have a master in e-commerce, but I'm not an IT expert, that's clear. Okay, so as I said, we are a nose-to-tail provider for MRO solutions, one of the big top three in this market. Yeah, from that, I'm responsible for the component availability part of it. I think it would be nice to have a look at that. What I want to show you is a little bit this is, as I said, we are an airline MRO. we are the oldest one, more than 100 years, 101, barely like all the other airlines trying to survive and remaining the oldest one. That's why we have to adapt to everything around us. And currently we are adapting our strategy and our services to the COVID situation and also preparing for the post-COVID situation. As stated by my previous speaker, a global network is important because transportation is getting more and more expensive, but also the carbon footprint is one of the things that we are challenged by the world. So we try to avoid traveling too much with our assets, but trying to find local solutions. And last but not least, in these cases, and I think that's very connected to the first speaker and also to the second speaker, that we have innovation is one of our strong development areas in predictive maintenance, predictive logistics, and other big data analysis. So, look, I will concentrate in my short presentation on component support. What I said, component availability. For those who are not completely aware of component availability, what it is, it means that the customer, the only thing he has to do is request a component. And then we will take care of delivering the component in the right time, in the right place, in the right condition, with the right paperwork, normally within 24 hours on any place in the world. We do that from our 3 logistics centers in the world, Paris, Amsterdam, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and Miami. We take care of the transportation. I got an echo now. Transportation of the serviceable and the unserviceable component. We do the inventory management. We do reliability management of the component. So we make sure that the component has the longest time on wing for the customer. Of course, we make sure that the unserviceable is repaired and we put them on stock. And we manage the repair vendors. That is the full availability product. So taking away all the burden from the customer. As I said, we are globally a network. So that's what I explained, our locations in Paris, Amsterdam, Miami, and Singapore, Kuala Lumpur to service the world. But we also have our connection between our local warehouses, like one in South African, but everywhere to make sure that in cases of AOG, we can be at the customer between 8 and 12 hours in a case of AOG situation. If I look into the impact of the COVID, and at this moment, what we see is that we are struck by a lot of phase out of aircraft. The A380 and the 747 passengers are phased out. So the 747s flying are mainly cargo airplanes. The 777-200 and the A330-200s are also going down quite dramatically in volumes. And we see a lot of replacements of the current generation aircraft, the A320 and the 737 Next Gen, being replaced by the A220, the A320neo, and the MAX. And the A350 and 787 remain strong. So what you see is a strong decline in the legacy aircraft area, and a increase, a stabilization on the 78 and A350, the first aircraft that went flying again, and are quite ramp up. The A220 ramp up is quite impressive at the moment. And well, we expect the MAX to be flying in the next few months, and that will also create a huge increase in that market again. So what does that mean for component availability? Yeah, if I look at component availability, that a lot of airlines, or all the airlines, have financial problems. By the way, Air France-KLM also as an airline has considerable financial problems, of course. And that will mean that airlines will get smaller or even disappear. We have seen one of our big customers, Norwegian, in Europe, has completely stopped their operation. I think they are flying domestic 6 aircraft, but they grounded several hundred aircraft. And we also see that a lot of orders for new aircraft have either been cancelled or postponed. So that's what you see. What you also see is that the availability of surplus is expected to rise. On the short term, it's not so much, but that's because a lot of airlines are using their overstock to avoid repairs. So they are consuming their stock. But more and more aircraft will be phased out and turned down. And that will generate, especially on the legacy market, considerable surplus availability. And you see in that area a big shift from power by the hour to time material. Airlines are not willing to pay any more power by the hour, but they say, well, if we have an issue, we will send it in and have it repaired by event, or look on the surplus market if there's something available. Airlines have very limited money to invest. That's clear. And if they want to invest it, they want to invest it in their operation and not in inventory. And for the new aircraft types, inventory is very expensive. So you see, and I concur with what was said in the previous presentation, is that the demand for availability services on this new generation aircraft is increasing. Airlines do not want to buy inventory, but want to take part of a pool or one of the bigger pool suppliers. And depending on the situation of the airline, some are looking for a total integrator, like an Air France-KLM, and others are looking more into an OEM solution, OEM by OEM solution, where they have to handle with several big OEMs to have that resolved. And one of the things is that availability providers, because of this effect, availability providers have a big challenge at the moment. You can understand that the current stock, is for legacy needs to be consumed. There has to be invested in new stock for new aircraft types. That has to be done in a very sensitive way to make sure that it's not an overstock, not an understock. Capital is expensive. Financing needs to be done in a lot of cases because there's not enough cash flow anymore in the company or free cash to use it. So it's a very challenging time to re-optimize the stock, and also important to reduce the supply chain time, to make sure that every 10 days in the supply chain time results in 10 to 20 million of inventory you need extra to service your customers. So it's very important to keep the supply chain time down. So one of our biggest challenges at this moment is the management of the supply chain by inventory planning and by maintaining the supply chain, the return times of the components and the repair times of the components. Just an example from how the supply chain works. So the customer demands a new component, and the component is delivered to the customer. That is the first step of the supply chain. It takes normally 24 hours. Not a big deal. It's important to have a high service level, and if you have enough stock and you manage the supply chain, it's okay. But for the component availability provider, then the work only starts. So we have to get the core back from the customer. We store it. In the meantime, the airline installs it. The unserviceable will go to a logistics center, and the on-site store will be replenished by a serviceable. And then it will be sent over to a repair center for repair. And after that, it is repaired, it will be sent back to the logistics center to service for our next customer. And what you see here is that 97% of the supply chain is about the repair cycle and the reverse logistics. So that is why it's so important to manage the supply chain, because the shorter you can make this 97% of the supply chain, the lower you can make your inventory to service your customer. Then looking at the MRO side of it, because component availability is availability and MRO, what we see is that the independent MROs a lot of the independent MROs are specialized in technology of the legacy aircraft, the aircraft that are phased out at the moment. So their volume currently is reduced because of the fact that airlines use their own inventory or there's surplus available, and they don't have much capital available to develop capabilities on new generation aircraft. Apart from that, also the OEM is a big player in this market, and they are protecting their aftermarket by doing intellectual property protection, making the independent MROs very difficult to develop capabilities, and then only on the more standard products that were also on the legacy aircraft. And that creates limited alternatives on the market for next generation aircraft. And so a lot of airlines have to depend on the OEMs or on an integrator that has a good relation with an OEM. So for us, as a Air France KLM, it's very important to see how we can develop in-house capabilities as we know that we cannot rely anymore on the independent MROs, and that we want to be a counter to the dominance of the OEMs. So if you look at our strategy, the post-COVID strategy, and what we are implementing now, first of all, we want to make use of the position as an airline MRO to try to cooperate with OEMs. As an airline MRO, we create a mutual dependency between an OEM and MRO, because they want to sell aircraft, they want to sell assets, cabin items, all the BFE items to an airline, and we want to perform MRO on their products. So there is a good dependency, and we are using that to try to cooperate as best we can with the OEMs. Of course, we have the PSEA and the SSC from Boeing and Airbus to support us as an airline, and giving us a little bit more leverage than a full independent MRO shop. And of course, and then maybe that comes back to the first presentation on the data, there's a mutual interest in exchange of knowledge. You mentioned that is data a value or is it a cost? For us, data is a value, because we are, as an operator, we have the intellectual property and to my opinion, the ownership of the data of the aircraft. We are flying the aircraft, we put fuel in the aircraft, so we generate data, and it's our intellectual property. And if you are discussing with an OEM on getting maintenance manuals and repair manuals, etc., they are talking about intellectual property. And so we also have intellectual property being our data, and our ability to transform that data into to predictive maintenance, predictive logistics is an asset that we can share with, we can use as an exchange of knowledge towards OEMs. The second thing is, yeah, we have to focus on component availability for a limited number of aircraft types. So in fact, we could do all the aircraft types, 74, 75, 76, ATRs, all the aircraft you can imagine were in our portfolio. Now we are reducing that more to the next generation aircraft, so the 737 MAX, the NEO, the A320neo, the 78 A350, and the E2, and are scaling down on the other aircraft types where we will not offer availability anymore. We will still do repairs because we have to repair capability, but we see that as a smaller market, and we are concentrating on the new aircraft types. We want to invest for customers, knowing that the airlines are in need of, are short of cash, and want to have an availability provider buy the assets which they can lease or have an availability fee for. A lot of them, we want to be a single point of access for nose to tail. So airlines that don't want to work with 8 to 12 OEMs for availability, they are coming to integrators like us to say, okay, you will handle it for the OEMs. And we are tailoring our solutions, not only anymore to PBH or time material, but also a mix of them, availability against PBH, repair against T&M. What the customer wants, we can offer any financial solution to help them operate. And last but not least, we are investing in innovation, very much in innovation. Digital is our key asset, is what I showed on the second slide. So big data, predictive maintenance is really an investment and development we are doing. We need to stop stock optimizing by our internal developed optimizing system, because we think that we have tried a few off-the-shelf inventory systems, but we have acknowledged that our knowledge of the supply chain and of the airline industry is higher than the standard products. So we developed our own stock optimizing tool, and we are also working on all kind of automated logistic solutions to get the supply chain moving quicker and quicker, and getting all the waiting time out of the reverse logistic part of the supply chain. And last but not least, we are doing the capability development on the cost drivers, so to make sure that we are controlling the cost of our important components. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harmen, and very informative presentation, especially on how you're looking at supply chain, and a valid point you raise of how critical logistics, shipping, effective, freight forwarding. Because I remember back in the good old days, we had the whole concept by Lufthansa called JIT, or just in time, and then they had another product which is called TD Flash, or time definite flash. And it worked great because back then in Southeast Asia, there was this wonderful focus on just-in-time manufacturing for technology and computer components and so on. And then aviation took off, and then airlines started to see an emergence in local carriers, and then there was this immense need and demand for creating something of a similar supply chain model. And I think that's very critical, and let's park that thought. Let's have all these questions for later. I know that we have a question from Narayan Morni hi Narayan, thanks for your question. We'll just take up your question in the end, just about that's right after our last speaker. Please join me in welcoming.
Mark, sorry for interrupting. I informed Simon I have a hard stop at 10. So if you have to do it now, because I have to step out of the conference in 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. Do we have any questions for? Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
So, Tony. So, hello, Harmen. Can you hear me? So your presentation very, very interesting, very impressed me, because I in Component also 20 years. I workshop manager also now the Shiret for the Component. I release the Component. So how about you see about the trend of the especially pooling and airpage? Because I see your slide mentioned the pooling. A lot of airlines now remove the pooling, and also they phase out on the fly hour agreement due to about the used service material is very cheap now, maybe about 50% rise, and a lot of spare parts available very cheap price. So why we need to have pooling at the moment? Because pooling only help to save the cost, but now the cost is no need, because now a lot of cheap spare. Even though engine A310 I can buy 5 million rather than 10 million. Why I have to keep up with the pooling? So as you are the number one or big player in the pooling and airpage, or leader in providing this service, how you to help customer to save the cost and reduce your hour per cycle for component?
Well, it's what I said. If the pooling on the older legacy aircraft is probably over. So people are going. It's so cheap to buy a surplus material for A320ceos, 737 next gens, etc. The problem, and that's why I said we are focusing now on the next generation aircraft. If you can give me a lot of surplus on 78 and A350, if you have a good address for that, please give me a call, because I cannot find it. So there is, as far as I know, no surplus available for the Neo, partly for the Max, because that can be common with the next gen. but especially A350 and 78, there is no surplus. There is no tear down. It is the fuel economy aircraft that all the airlines start operating as the first airline after the COVID. So you will see a huge increase on the short term on those aircraft types, and also demand for components. And that is where pooling can work, because there is nothing available on the market, and even OEMs are not able at this moment to provide new components, because they are waiting for the ramp up of the Boeing and Airbus manufacturers to deliver to the production. So I believe in pooling on the next gen, and also airlines don't have money to buy new, and there is no surplus, so they have to buy very high value components.
Yeah,
and you know that we're talking about $400,000-$500,000 a piece components for 787s and A350 for the critical components. So there is not enough money to buy own inventory. So pooling for these aircraft is, for a lot of airlines, the only solution, I'm afraid. Boeing is selling the most Maxes at this moment, including a component availability program.
So another question is, because I know you have a lot of independent support you for component side, because alone the Air France, MRAeS, AFKL, not enough capability to, not enough supply to can cover for the whole of your own contract for the fly out agreement, pooling, because you support a lot of airlines. Because in Vietnam, I know a lot of airlines already signed with the Air France. I know, like Vietnam Airlines also signed with you. Mm-hmm. So how you keep your independent MRO survive during this time? Because they will support you at the later stage when the market recover. Because if this time, if you rest the independent MRO so low for the rising, you also get the reserve from the airline to reduce the cost, reduce the fly hour per cycle, the price for fly hour cycle. So how you deal with this one to support you in the later stage? This one very important.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. Well, to be honest, we are trying. We are sending as much as components. Well, what we do not do in house, because we also have to save our own company, and that we also have an issue in our own company. So we try to repair as much as we can, and we try to use our Barfield facility in Miami and our Singapore facility. Next to that, we are trying to find solutions with independence for the legacy aircraft. We know that at this moment it is very difficult to work with independents on the new generation aircraft, because we cannot invest in their equipment. We have to invest in our own equipment. So we are doing what we can based on the legacy aircraft and using independent MRO shops, because I think we need them in our love-hate relation with OEMs, let's put it that way. Because sometimes, as I said, we do an exchange of knowledge, because cooperation is a solution. But in the meantime, we try to keep this independent MRO base alive and support us. And yeah, so for time material work, that is for legacy, it's a good source that we try to use as much as possible.
Thank you.
No, thanks. Before you go, just one question for you from me here. Now, I think it's so getting omnipresent day by day that part pool agreement is only going to start working for possibly new age business jets, the new generation helicopters, the 787. You know, I mean, to some extent, the new 777, because they've lowered and they've upgraded quite a few of the core components from the 777 Classics, which is a 300ER, and of course the 350 and so on. How do you see, the ratio? There is a decline with part pool moving over to surplus parts and so on. So how do you see that pan out? That would be great to get your perspective.
You mean the ratio between time material and availability?
Correct, sir. That is right.
I think, or maybe it's wishful thinking as a product development on component availability. I think that on the 78, A350, even A220, I think that most of the airlines, more than 50%, will choose for availability products. The only exceptions, the clear exceptions, and that it remains a difficult one. There is a market, very big operators that have enough money to support them from other sources than from flying, that can buy their own inventory.
Right.
But I think that giving a number is difficult, but it's over 50% of the airlines will have to go to get support in component availability. By the way, on the A350, it's much higher. On the A350, it's much higher already. So that's that's where we see the MAX. Not sure, but the A350 is clearly where Airbus, Air France, KLM are and Lufthansa are the three big players that. Well, I think that we have about 80% of the market at this moment already together. And on the 787, it's about 75% of the market is by Boeing, Air France, KLM, Lufthansa, and a little bit by SRT. So that's also about 75%. Though, just what I said, there are some airlines, very big airlines, that can do it themselves. But even the Delta Airlines cannot support their own A350 anymore. We support them for their A350. And that is, I think that's a huge game changer, that the big US airlines also are looking now for these kind of solutions.
Right. No, thank you so much, Harmen.
That can be a cycle. In 10 years, maybe they move away and go back to their own inventory because there is surplus on the market, because there is PMA on the market, because there is alternatives on the market. But for the next 10 years, and especially now in this economical crisis for all the airlines, I see for a 10 years period, not a real change.
So, one of the challenges that I see, and because we do a lot of safety work, is parts that come in from surplus. Some of those parts are shipped without any traceability documentation. There really isn't any verified background of where it was taken off, whether it was put in a test bench, whether it was certified, released, no document history. At least most lesser, most leasing lesser terms kind of forbid you to use PMA, and that's something which a lot of the banks are pretty sticky on. And how would you deal with that challenge, at least in the APAC market?
We have a very strict policy towards our surplus suppliers. We are not working with all the surplus suppliers, and we are very strict in last shop reports, last operator reports, back to birth reports if necessary. No PMA, and if we have it, then if we find out, it gives a huge penalty. So we have a trustworthy surplus supplier base. Only a limited number of suppliers qualify. We audit them because they know we are very strict, especially in our programs together with Boeing. We are very strict in no PMA and no incident-related items with a good last maintenance MRO certificate attached to it. Otherwise, we don't buy it. So we limit the availability of surplus by being very critical what we buy.
I understand. No, fully appreciate it. Thank you so much, Harmen. Truly appreciate you being with us today, and thanks so much for the insight.
Okay, thank you. And I have to leave. Sorry for everybody.
No problem, sir. Good to have you with us. Thank you. Let's just move on to our next speaker. We'd request questions to be parked for the end, please. Our next speaker is Luke Morvan, Chief Representative for MTU Maintenance Lease Services. Over to you, Luke. Okay, we're not getting your...
Luke, you're on mute.
Yes, now we're getting you clear.
Can you hear me now? Is that working?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, let me quickly just introduce myself. My name is Luc Morvan. I'm running the Singapore office on behalf of MTU Maintenance Lease Services, which is obviously the engine leasing division out of the MTU Maintenance Group. basically taking care of three main things: engine leasing, engine trading, and technical services. So I was asked to participate and to answer a few questions which are then biased by my only engine view. So a lot of questions we'll try to answer on the USM specifically, the impact of COVID, but bear in mind, this is really with my engine expert eyes. So the first question that I was asked to answer is basically the impact of COVID-19 on the current demand. And of course, yes, the impact is huge. There is no demand. And if you take a look at the engine, if you take a look at short-term leasing, which is our specialty, which is supposed to cover maintenance events, maintenance is expensive. There is a cash constraint. There is no maintenance. There is no need for short-term engine leasing at the moment. It's very, very limited. On the piece part side, it's about the same. You have two kind of parts on an engine: the core parts that are being used during heavy shop visits, and you have the LRUs. And we're seeing a bit of demand on the LRUs. We're seeing very limited demand of the core engine parts, also because of that delay of the shop visits. But we're seeing demand for engines themselves. So serviceable engines potentially to be traded, to be exchanged against unserviceable ones, always in the spirit of avoiding shop visits. So that's what we're actually seeing on that market. The second question was, how could airlines and MROs take advantage of the USM and secure reliable access to USM? I cannot really tell other MROs how to do it, but I can tell you how we did it. And I think that we decided to step into that problematic already 7 years ago when we founded the engine leasing division out of the MTU group. Of course, one side of the coin was we need to provide lease support to our MRO customers. But the second side of the coin is, what do we do when the engines are unserviceable? We are asset owners and we're becoming engine lessors. And how do we make sure that we are extracting the right value? And how do we make sure that we are using those parts internally in our own shops? So building up an engine leasing platform is indeed good for MTU. You support your maintenance side, but at the same time, you also secure the USMs you need. And with, let's say, typical engines having fresh from overall having 5 to 8 years on the clock, we are getting those engines now ready for tear down and ready for that used serviceable material to be spread within our shops. The other question I wanted to answer was, how will the early retirement of aircraft affect the USM market? First, I will say right now, it's not affecting it at all. On the current narrow body generation, we're seeing actually very little transaction linked to the potential repossessions or the COVID-19 crisis. Everything so far is on hold. We're seeing just as many potential asset availability last year than we saw the year before. There is not really an increase. What you're seeing is that specific flavors of aircraft are coming into retirement, that's for sure, but that's not really the current narrow body generation, which is accounting for most of the fleet flying around. So that is having an impact, but very, very limited to those 737 next gen and to the current A320s. So I think that one part of that question was also related to what Harmen answered with regards to traceability and quality and how this will affect. And I have probably a very biased view on that, but I absolutely do not foresee that the upcoming wave of retirement will lower the quality and traceability of parts, simply because in all this history, and that was already the case 10 years ago, the more supply you have on the market, the more competition you have between suppliers, the more paperwork quality is used to differentiate your parts. So, I mean, if you take a look, not that long ago, you could basically sell an engine life limited part with just the last operator NIS and a release cert, more or less. And now you need to provide the NIS for all the operators, the non-PMA and DR statements from all the operators. And this is absolutely not linked to the basically authorities asking for it. That has not changed. The civil aviation is asking for the same requirements on those parts. So this is only driven by market, by protection of asset value, and actually driven by traders competing with each other and saying, my part is better because I have that additional statement. You don't know you need it, but hey, believe me, you need it. And that's a little bit my views on that. So I think the paperwork requirements will go higher. We need to be prepared to monitor the data, to collect the data, to make sure that your records are correct and complete. And what will happen is if you don't have it, then you can be sure that your parts will not be sold, or that your engine will not going to be sold. I don't think that there will be a shift in the mentality on the acceptance of the paperwork. The next question I was asked to answer was our views on the potentially increased usage of USM, PMA parts, DR repairs, and the OEM new parts. What I believe, and that's probably what we see right now, a natural effect of COVID-19 is to see the fair market value of the assets going down. So basically, your engine or your aircraft, it lost value last year simply because nobody's needing it. And that's also the question about no transactions, because there is no need. Nobody is buying because there is absolutely no place to fly a serviceable aircraft or to fly a serviceable engine. So fair market value goes down. The repair cost is not going down because those used parts, they are not yet available. They will be when the retirement will actually be heavily active on this generation of aircraft. So again, fair market value goes down. Shop visit cost, not. So your BR threshold is definitely going down. That means that, you know, the shop visit is becoming way more expensive than it is potentially to purchase the same engine on the market. And this is where it is probably likely that the OEM will take a shortcut in there by lowering the or by giving more discounts on the new parts. That's what I believe, so that they can continue having shop visits which are generating profits for them. On the PMA parts, I have very little to say on that. We don't see any acceptance. We don't actually, as MTU, provide any support on PMA parts. We're seeing the cost of ownership being too heavily impacted by those parts to have any kind of play in the engine world. DRs, that's a different story. Simply because under specific conditions, DRs are actually very efficient, and those conditions are who's owning the asset, who's operating the asset, and if there is an equal sign between owner and operator, and if that particular operator owning their engine is also willing to fly it for a particular long period of time, then the savings that you make out of the DR repairs or the increased reliability you get out of the DR repairs, of the combination of both, is actually making it very interesting for them. And it's sure that will have an impact on your residual value. But if you're planning to operate your fleet for long enough, and if you're planning to have enough shop visit events to compensate that residual value, it can be a very smart calculation for an operator. And I think that I'm coming to the last of my questions, which was facing the increased USM supply. What are the challenges for the OEMs, and how could that become more active on the USM market? Yeah, the thing is, if you're not there anymore, or if you're not there yet, the only way you can be more active is by buying. And right now, I don't think that anybody is willing to heavily invest in those parts. That is why we're pretty happy with the choice we've made of having our own engine pool, so that we can actually manage our own parts, and we actually already owning them, serviceable or not serviceable. I don't really want to provide a solution to the OEMs. I'm an independent MRO supplier. But what I can probably say is, and that's what we're foreseeing in the future of maintenance, is that there will be a big challenge for all of the MROs and for all of the OEMs to make sure that when it comes to maintenance, that you're adapting whatever you're planning to do with the engine to its actual expected lifetime. What I mean by that is that it doesn't make sense to right now to repair a narrow body engine with a full stack of new LLPs if your outcome and your provision is that in 5 or 6 years you're retiring that aircraft or that engine anyway. So overbuilding is probably the one strategy that I think everybody will want to avoid. They can do that with the USM, of course, because you can lower the LLP build, which is a good example. But also you can extend probably the life of the engines by some smaller repairs. You can use lease support. You can have plenty of very flexible ways of making sure that you are matching the current maintenance scheme of your asset based on the expected life remaining. And this is exactly what we're doing on our side for our own fleet. And that's why we have also within our portfolio of product technical services, because this is also something we can do for any lessor or any operator interested into it. So that's it. I believe I made it almost on time. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions or comments. As I said, it's not really proper PowerPoint presentation, but more like a couple of thoughts to be thrown out there and waiting for comments or questions on it.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Luc, and no, very interesting perspective from MTU, and good to have you with us. We're, as I say, time flies when you're having fun. We're just about crossing our threshold for this webinar. Let's take up some questions now before we call it a day. We got 2 questions for Mr. Trinh Cuong from Narayan Moni. So the first question is, do you foresee and Vietstar engage in engine trades in 2021, either as a seller or a buyer? So, Mr. Cuong from Vietstar, can I request you to respond to this, please?
We only a buyer, we're not seller, because we only we also the airline, and we only buy the spare part. We not sell anything. But the service we sell, we only do the repair for A310, A321, and also private jet. But for in terms of the spare part, we only do we only a buyer, not a seller.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. And we've got a question for Luc from Narayan Moni again. The question for you, Luc, is do you foresee the market, either buyers or sellers, either buyer or lease providers of engine, demanding that family of engine pedigree paperwork go from paper PDF to electronic format, that XML and SON, to enable frictionless trades of engines? This move will make it easier to evaluate the assets and facilitate frictionless, easier trades of assets.
Yeah, I will first probably answer by saying that I have not yet seen the real move from paper to PDF, which is really a shame. I mean, there is absolutely no reason why you should have everything printed. And I think that this first step of electronic records, which is the PDF version, is not even there yet. Yes, and I think electronic formats, yes, that would definitely support the industry. Do I welcome it? I wish that this would be possible in the near future. I don't think it will be the case in the near future, to be fair. I don't think the market is ready for it yet. And I think that people will always have the feeling that having something physical like paper is of a certain matter, which is not. So, but I would already love to see more PDF acceptance. And when you're talking about engine records, you're talking about thousands and thousands of pages. And that is just taking a ridiculous amount of space, and also, a ridiculous amount of paper, which is really such a waste.
Thank you so much, Luc. Narayan, thank you for that question. Very pertinent. Do we have any more questions from the attendees?
I have a question for MTU. Look, so in terms of you are the engine lessor, also the maintenance service for engine. I know MTU also very famous. You see, you already mentioned to us the engine is asset is now rub the value, decrease the value very strongly. There's some engine I know they also rub 50%. So service also will be less. So in terms of your asset will be rough because you also have some engine spare for a chain, other service because you also provide the engine repair. So for sure you have. So how you avoid, because you are not OEM. So you are not OEM. So that's the reason why you have no advantage for the spare part for repair. So you still have to buy the spare from the OEM to repair the engine for your customer. So but the spare part not reduced much, but your repair price must be rough due to competition and due to the a lot of engine spare outside rough value. So how you deal with this situation? You cannot do and you lost for repair the engine, right? For engine is very important. For other component, not much different, but for engine is big value. So that also this is also the issue for the independent MRO for engine at the moment, because OEM they have the rights, they cannot rub the rights, but they can have a chance to rub to take your share back, because if they are OEM engine, they can rub the rights of repair engine more than you to attract to get back on the customer from you easily, because they don't need profit for the repair, they only need profit for the spare. They can sell, but they can take back the share from independent MRO for like you for engine shops. So how you deal with this one? It's a very difficult situation at the moment. OEM they still have privilege, but for independent MRO for engine is a difficult times.
Yeah, well, I think that the entire topic here is linked to that. Is how as independent MRO supplier we're coping with the OEM challenges. And yes, we will foresee competition from the OEMs, and that's why I'm mentioning they will probably lower the new parts price. That's what they can do. But that's why we have USM, and that's why we have an engine leasing company that is pushing engines for these assemblies so that we can use those parts. That is also why MTU is actually having a lot of in-house repair capabilities, because then you're also having a internal competitive advantage towards some other players that are actually just sending the parts back to the OEM for repair. So, and that is why we have DR repairs, so that we can not only provide a cost solution on specific repairs, but also improve the reliability. And yes, we need to be more creative for sure, but I truly believe, yeah, I truly believe we are. So I'm not really scared about that.
Because I think for a shop it's a little bit difficult when we compete with the OEM independent MRO. For the C-check capability, heavy airframe maintenance will be have more opportunity for the independent MRO, because it is a high intensity labor cost, and the high intensity labor cost is not advantage of the OEM MRO. But independent MRO they have like the ST you see the number one MRO in the world, because mostly it's mainly the revenue come from the heavy airframe maintenance, because they have advantage. They can control the cost for the labor, and the cost of labor of OEM usually higher than the other MRO. But for component is very difficult. Component is you see the engine around 60% in the spare part value already. That's a very low margin for the independent MRO can compete with the OEM at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I do not really share the concerns with regards to the strong OEM competition. Yes, we're foreseeing that there will be more competition, but there's always been a lot of competition. And that is why we have, yes, different services, different views on the way you can repair an engine, you can extract the value, the way you need to manage them. And yeah, I'm pretty confident in our own technical solutions and support to customers. And I challenge you, if you have an engine available for repair, then show it to me, and then show it to the OEM.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And well, just we went into overtime, and now it's kind of creeping into way beyond out of schedule. But this has been a wonderful discourse, I think, collectively, to share all the views from everybody: Albert Koszarek, Mike Harris, Mr. Cuong, um, Luke, and Harmen. I think what really emerges quite effectively is that there is some level of baseline focus on reinforcing supply chain and on a concerted effort to try and bridge a simplicity, a digital, a process-driven or data-driven approach to how we can manage. And I think a lot of what we've seen today from Aeroxchange's presentation, guys, please look up Aeroxchange, aeroxchange.com. Is and for a platform to be backed by an airline, I think it's just outstanding. So you're not dealing with bean counters. You're dealing you're dealing with guys who probably been there, done that, and ticked all the boxes. Mike Harris, comes from clearly his experience of coming from Jetstar, and he looking at data as a strong method and means to look at how best you as an airline, as an organization, as an MRO can look at it, understanding better from what you have from your data. Very informative. Would like to thank Harmen for sharing how Air France KLM is innovating, at least in the Asian Pacific, in the APAC region, with their development center in Singapore, as well as their approach and methodology to look at supply chain, component repair, release to service, and very interesting how the ratio of surplus parts for the 737 Classics and the 320 prior to Neo is actually helping airlines lower costs. And of course, I'd like to thank our last guest, Luc Morvan. Luc, merci, wonderful having you with us, and look forward to all of you here coming back again for a webinar, for webinars hosted by InnoWin. As I say, hey, hop onto a webinar. Pants are optional. For yourself a cognac, a martini, or whatever you want, and you could dim the lights like what Albert's done over there, and enjoy the experience. So wonderful having you back. Stay safe. I think we're just about, I hope by the second and third quarter of 2021, the world recovers from this pandemic insanity, and we could again collectively commune for conferences and seminars and network like humans supposed to do. Shake hands, exchange business cards, have a drink, and that. So I think wonderful conversation, great presentations. Thank you so much for attending. Wish you a wonderful day ahead, a lovely evening, and a great morning.